Hi everybody, it's Linda here, aka Ammonia Voice, with my third episode this time. And first of all, Happy New Year to everybody. I took a little break. I was back in Czech Republic and I thought I'd take some time to um, decompress, to not be so much on my phone and PC so that I can focus and dive straight into 2025. So I hope the year started really well for you. And I was thinking what to do, what kind of topic to cover this time. And since it's the new year and everybody is filling their diaries and papers with resolutions, and also everybody's sharing their successes of 2024, I thought, what about doing an episode on failure? Because why not? I think it's a really important topic and it's something that, like an elephant in the room, that everybody is trying to avoid. And I think there is no reason to. I think it's actually very important to talk about it. So, this episode is going to be about my relationship to failure, what I learned from it, and how to transform it into growth and something positive. So, how I came to this topic, it was actually when I was back in Czech Republic, and I have this tradition that I always make photo albums, like just for my personal stuff with friends and family and whatever, just so that I know where I was, what I did, where did I travel, whatever. And strangely, because I wasn't at home for a year, I found this stack of images from 2023 that I still didn't manage to put into that photo album. And it was crazy for me to go through these images because 2023 was literally the worst year for me ever. It was one failure after another, in terms of my work, in terms of creativity, in terms of my personal life, relationships, housing crisis. It was just everything all at once. And when I was looking back at myself that year, I thought, wow, I have one big failure that year. But you know what? I realized by looking at that how much I moved on and how far I am from that point of my life, and how much this period has actually taught me. So from that point, I thought, okay, maybe it's an important theme to talk about because there's a lot of shame surrounding failure. But I think it's really important to learn how to embrace failure and see what positive came out of it. There was another thing that brought me to this topic because because I missed my bus back to Amsterdam, which was a funny failure. I was supposed to leave on the 3rd of January and after midnight. So of course on the 3rd of January I thought, like, wait, it left like at night, so I was supposed to book a trip on the 4th of January. Anyway, I managed to get back home here, and but it was like the beginning of the year with one not tiny, it was kind of like a mediocre failure, let's call it like that. So let's dive into this. So as an artist, failure is something we have to get accustomed to, accept it and embrace it. Yeah, perhaps it's not only a thing related to artists, but in general, it's part of who we are as human beings. And even though I think artists fail constantly, or perhaps the difficult part of failure is that it's very personal to us because art often makes us really vulnerable. It's directly connected to us, so it's inherently connected to our practice. But I think what is really important, that failure is a catalyst for growth and it's an inherent part of creation, because failure often leads to unexpected breakthroughs or shifts in perspectives. I mean, see it like that. As an artist, we try to constantly apply to open calls, and most of the times it's a rejection. I, I always feel it's like 99% failure and 1% works out. So at some point it can become really demotivating. But by focusing on the 1% of what worked out, you realize what kind of platforms suit you and who might be your potential audience, because not all platforms can be a match for you. You know, everybody has different style, different aesthetics, different kind of topics that they like to cover. So this also is something that took me quite a long time to figure it out and adjust my I don't know, applications, let's say. And there is one thing that I try to repeat to myself all the time, and that is rejection is a redirection. So if you think of failure, always try to repeat rejection is a redirection, and it suddenly sounds way more positive. You know, because I also think that the system kind of wants us to fail or maybe get blocked by this situation and think that there is no other way. And perhaps our jobs as creatives is to find these alternatives, alternative routes of resisting, of living otherwise. Because perhaps those open calls or whatever it is that you're dealing with perpetuate narratives that are not you. And lately, I noticed a strange thing that I feel that constantly very similar projects get picked out, or it's like the same projects I always see winning. And then I realize it's also because all the juries keep being the same. And that is, of course, like being a jury, I find it a very difficult position because it reflects a personal taste. And if the group of people who have certain tastes are constantly part of different competitions, and just one line of thought, one line of aesthetics gets promoted, which I think is not really fair. And it also makes me think, are these prizes really something necessary for my survival as an artist, or to get value as an artist? I don't know. So that's why I just kind of decided to do things my own way, self-publish my books, create when I feel like it. And I also learned how to manifest the right people, and that they will come to me if they want to create something together. So I'm not trying to like force myself somewhere. Of course, I sometimes do apply to open calls, which I think could be relevant for me or that could be a good match with my work. But I do it way less than I did before. And it the way how I changed my mind, it was crazy that it did work, or I feel that the right people are coming onto my path, and I am being asked for collaborations, and I think those collaborations are always a good match. And in Czech we have this saying, it is you are the constructor of your own happiness. So at the end of the day, you have to be the one who takes the charge. And instead of making this failure block you, you have to adjust yourself, you know, change direction. And there is a lot of beauty in failure. I think I discovered so many new things thanks to failure. Also, just because I am an analog photographer, so many times I failed in the process of developing, of taking pictures, of winding my film. And that's totally fine, because sometimes those mistakes became the work. Those mistakes became beautiful. They became part of the whole process. And you know, these light leaks, chemicals, whatever it is, it just makes you think of your work from a different perspective. And often during portfolio reviews, I hear people say that they are striving for perfection, that their image is not perfect. But I think perfection often leads to frustration, because perfection should never be the final destination, because perfection is almost impossible, and it's unattainable at some point. The beauty, the real beauty is in the whole process. And this fear, let's say, of failure, or this striving for perfection, it really does paralyze this creativity. It's like a block, or like the stone that you have to carry. It's a burden. And once you learn where this fear is coming from, and why it is there in the first place, try to confront it, you know, risk it, face it. And I know it's scary, but if you do it, you might realize that it's not as bad, or it wasn't that bad as you originally thought. And in the end, at least that's something that I came to, um, is that the regret of not doing things is actually way worse than the fear of failure, you know, if you confront it, if you go for it. So when I started my project about happiness, um, I was really scared to shift my way of thinking towards this more gut feeling and emotionally directed life. I had to let go of, let's say, pragmatism and logics, and it felt so difficult because I think in Europe in general we are very much ruled by certain rules um, and systems and structures. And when I finally managed to let go, I thought everything was happening for the right reason. Things that were not meant to be on my path were gone, and even though now I don't know how I got into certain points in my life, it just feels right that I'm at the right place. So I would really recommend to embrace this process and just like go fully in and face your fears and don't be afraid of failures. Um, I think the important part is that societal or cultural expectations create this pressure to avoid failure, and particularly in the art world. Sorry, there's a hair that keeps tickling my face. Much better. So if you go into an art opening, everybody is pretending. I find it so funny. Everybody is pretending that their lives are absolutely perfect, that everybody is on the top of the world. But you know, nobody tells you that perhaps the artist who was exhibiting was eating bread the whole month just so that they can produce these framed images. Well, that artist is, of course, me. But that's why I never do exhibitions, because I don't like bread so much. But you know, there's so much fakeness in these kind of places. They're kind of devoid of failure. There's like this, there's exactly this surface level perfection that nobody understands what it actually is, and it's so not real for me. It's almost like an artificial bubble or something. And and I realized there's so much amount of self-destruction that you have to undergo as an artist to even enter the art world. It's a world where you are not allowed to fail. It's so toxic, and it almost feels that you have to sell your soul to make a living as an artist. and and it would lead you eventually to make art that you yourself hate, and that's so sad. That's why I'm trying to stay out of this world as much as I can. And I learned also something on the way, that I was working in a gallery, and I was often engaging with artists, and I was curious like how do they approach this world or being part of a gallery. And I thought at some point it was so constraining, because um, you get picked out to be in a gallery for you for a certain signature, and this signature stays with you forever. And the idea for me that I'm not able to experiment or just escape from this signature just for a moment, because of course your signature eventually becomes your selling point. But it's so frustrating, because what if I want to do something else for a while? What if I want to shoot something completely different? And I think in terms of that, the gallery becomes really, really stiff. And I saw how frustrated the artists were, and I could never really see myself in that world. You know, at some point I was I was thinking I would rather kill myself than and then do just repeat this thing, like let's say one filter over and over again, like for 50 years. Oh my god. I don't know. I was maybe change my identity, do 1 million plastic surgeries, just so that I can do whatever I want, you know, just change, start from scratch. Or I can just simply quit the gallery, but that wouldn't be as dramatic as I want it to be, you know. It's like this paradox of a free or a caged bird, you know, like this cage that we put on ourselves, but we think it's the best for us. Also, if we get the idea of flying and then we get caged, it's so existentially frustrating. If we're caged from the beginning, it's not as frustrating, but if you get a taste of the both worlds, it can become really, really destructive. What else? Failure can be also understood as a refusal to conform to these commercial or mainstream standards in art. So there's a lot of power in failure. I'm always so much more interested in the process than the final result, because at the end of the day, the result tells you nothing. And I remember when I was making this idea for the episode, I was writing some notes, and I thought about my exhibition in Athens, I think in 2022 or 23, I'm not sure. And it was a group show, and I was walking around and I saw this one painting. It was incredible. It was like fully red and really abstract, but it just made me stop for a long amount of time. And I was just staring at it. It was like, whoa, I really need to speak to the artist. I'm so interested to hear how did they come to this point. And I eventually managed to meet the painter, and I asked him, how did you make this paint? Not how did you make it, but how did you come to this painting? And he said that it was during a really bad period of his life when he was on an acid trip, and he got a really bad trip, and he jumped out of a window, and then he survived, even though he had to recover, of course, from the injuries for a long time. But that's the point when he started painting, you know. And I was quite shocked, first of all, that he survived, and second of all, that you experienced such an intense I don't know, let's say event in your life, and then you turn it into something beautiful or touching. And it is a kind of failure of sorts. I mean, if you jump out of the window, it's pretty crazy, no? So failure was like a redirection towards this painting, which is something really, really beautiful. And it sticks in my mind. Like, it's one of the artworks that I really remember, and that's kind of rare nowadays. So to kind of finalize on this note, I picked 3 books that I want to share with you in relation to the topic of failure. So let me bring the first one. The first one is called Failed Images. It was edited by Ernst von Alphen. I think he's the kind of OG of academia and cool topics, because he always makes these publications that are written in an academic way, but in a very interesting way. So he writes a lot about masculinity, sexuality, and photography, which is super interesting. And I like the title Failed Images because this book talks about how photography is inherently tied to failure, in terms of how photographs try to represent reality, which is of course skewed because it transforms anything that is in front of the camera. And I really like the introduction title. It says, "When does photography fail?" And I would really recommend it to anybody who's interested in hearing how photography is tied to failure, because it is a failed medium of sorts. And another book is Animal Joy by Noor Al-Sadir. It's a book that I just started reading on my journey on the bus back to Amsterdam, so I didn't finish it yet. But it's written by a poet and a psychoanalyst, and she seeks to recover the sensation of being present and also embodied. And it's very, very cool because she joins a clown school to research or to figure out our true selves and when these real outbursts of laughter happen. And in the first pages, there was like a little section on failure, so I'm gonna read it out to you because I think it's relevant. So she says, failure brings with it the possibility of growth and change, which is its own kind of hazard when you don't get to decide how you're going to be changed. At the same time, Bayes told us if you have a clear idea of the path you want to follow, you're just going to live in the part of your talent that you like and that you have confidence in. There's no surprise there. So this idea of surprise is of course connected to failure. You just have to go for it full-headed, you know? And I don't know where this book will bring me, but there's a lot of ideas about failure, true self, on being present and authentic. It's very relevant, so I would 100% recommend it to you. And the last book that which I cannot find, probably because of my moves, frequent moves, is Matt Haig's Midnight Library. It's a book about, it's a fiction, but it's a book about choices in life and regrets. And if we would have the possibility to change major decisions in our life, where we wondered, let's say, if we would be in a relationship with somebody else, if we would have a different career, if we would move to a different country. So this book is talking about this. And I'm not gonna spoil you very much, but I wrote down a few quotes which I thought were very I don't know, thought-provoking in terms of failure. So let me read them out to you. So, doing one thing differently is often the same as doing everything differently. Regrets ignore chronology, they float around. But you will never live if you are looking for the meaning of life. This is something similar that Anwar Al-Sadir is mentioning in her book. So where does this lead to? I would 100% recommend you to pursue happiness over excellence. And I hope that in 2025, you allow yourself to fail more and don't regret it, just embrace it. Thank you for being here with me. This was my third episode, and I'm gonna see you next week again. Kisses.